Hello, everyone. It's Francis Widowson here. Today, I would like to do a video on the most recent comments that Leah Gazan has made with respect to what is called residential school denialism. And for people who are unaware of Leah Gazan, she is a member of parliament for Winnipeg Centre, an NDP member of parliament, and she has been trying to criminalize what is called residential school denialism for the last couple of years. And she was recently on an interview, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago, where she made some additional comments about what she characterizes as residential school denialism. And I think that what Leah Gazan is doing is incredibly poisonous and destructive to the pursuit of truth. And so every time she makes comments about what is called residential school denialism, I want to provide an analysis of that so people can come to understand the terrible agenda, the terrible totalitarian agenda that she has in store for people who are trying to openly and honestly examine the residential schools in general, but the Kamloops case in particular. And so, in order to assist us in doing this, what I've done is I have created a blog post on the wokeacademy.info site because Gazan is, there's many things that are more violent than, or like, that's not even violent. First of all, saying to deny someone's story is to say that you're lying, because that's just contesting a claim. Whereas we have situations like the Holocaust and the concentration camps where many people were murdered. We have the situation in Rwanda where there was people hacked apart by machetes. And then we have, Latin America case where people were disappeared in the middle of the night, actually disappeared, where the police would come, haul someone away, and then you have pictures of mothers looking for their children who just disappeared and are demanding to know where actual people are buried. And this is a very different situation than just trying to ask for evidence about various claims that are made. So in terms of the blog post that I've done, what you'll notice is, first of all, I'm talking about this interview that Gazan was doing. And Gazan, she has three examples that she provides of what she calls residential school denialism. And I always use quotation marks around this because it's assumed by some that saying residential school denialism means that you're denying the existence of the residential schools, but that's not what's being claimed. It's about supposedly misrepresenting facts and denying the harms that have been caused. But she provides three examples of this, and they are, first of all, the book by Tom Flanagan, where she claims it's by Tom Flanagan, The Grave Hoax, but it's actually Grave Error, which I'll talk about shortly. Then you have this situation that's claimed to have existed about people showing up in the middle of the night to try to dig unmarked graves around the Kamloops in your residential school. And then you finally have the situation that I was involved in at the University of Victoria, which is that I was arrested, Leah Gazan claims, for spreading residential school denialism. And as we'll see shortly, that is not true. Anyway, so let's take a listen to this comment that Gazan made when she was in this interview.
One just has to look on the news how extreme it's gotten. Let's not forget, like I have put forward a bill. My bill isn't about discussions around the kitchen table. I want to be really clear. But there's a difference between stating a fact and inciting hate. I would argue that books like The Grave Hoax by Tom Flanagan, mass spreading of disinformation, mass spreading of denialism, that's an example of that. Having people go in the middle of the night to try and dig up unmarked graves around the Kamloops residential school, that is pretty violent. And we're seeing more of that behavior. Witterson, Frances Witterson, who was just arrested in BC for her spreading of residential school denialism. You know, Indigenous people, particularly survivors, their family members and communities, have a right to safety.
Notice the word safety. So we used to think safety was being safe from physical harm. Now safety means psychological harm. And so Gazan is claiming that me going into the University of Victoria, you know, this is somehow a threat to safety, which is people being faced with ideas that they disagree with.
Especially survivors who paved a way for this country through the sharing of their stories to put us on a path of reconciliation in this country. They have a right to be protected. If we want to reconcile in this country, we must ensure first and foremost that survivors are safe.
So if we want to reconcile, we must ensure the psychological safety of what she refers to as survivors, which are actually just former residential school students. We should really resist using this word survivor, because that is taken from genocide, people who survived genocide. So if you're going to use that term, you have admitted to genocide before you even got into a discussion about it.
That any harms or residual harms from residential schools is mitigated through acts like inciting hate through residential school denialism. That's why I put forward the bill, because it's getting quite serious in this country. Incitement of hate, inciting hate needs to be part of our criminal code. It's getting to a point where Indigenous peoples, as we see in conflicts that are brewing around the country, where people are coming face to face, that we need this legislation passed.
So that's a very disturbing comments that Gazan is making. Those are very disturbing comments, because you'll notice she's saying coming face to face. So disagreeing with Aboriginal people directly in person, she sees as threatening their safety. And of course, we saw at the University of Winnipeg when I was there that was in September of this year, they actually brought elders, people who are claimed to be elders like Geraldine Shingus, Grandma Shingus, and Vivian Ketchum, and they came and accosted me. Like, I wasn't going out to interact with them, but they're brought to kind of confront me. And then they have all these gangsters who say if you don't agree with them, then you are somehow disrespecting elders, and you should, basically be subject to various kinds of intimidation tactics. So that's Gazan's position. She refers to inciting hate all the time. And Gazan has got to be made to say what it is about contesting facts that amounts to inciting hate. And if you look at the Supreme Court decisions about hate speech, it's a very high bar. And this is the Wadcott decision and also the Ward decision. So Ward's case was, he was a comedian who was making fun of a disabled person who had become a public figure. And it was basically said, even though that's in poor taste, this is not considered to be hate speech or discrimination. And then Wadcott, it was argued that it rose to the level because he was actually saying that homosexuals should not be employed in the school system, even though he had no authority over hiring anyone. But it's generally thought to be arguing that someone should be cast out of society and not have the protections that are available to all other people. So it really is things like, the case of Rwanda, where you had someone calling an ethnic group cockroaches, and then, of course, seeing that this had terrible consequences because it resulted in a number of people, hundreds of thousands of people being killed because they were dehumanized. So it's this kind of dehumanization, detestation, and vilification. And contesting facts about the Kamloops case, it has nothing to do with this. Anyway, let's take a look at these examples in more detail that Gazan is providing. And so the first one, of course, is grave error, which she calls the grave hoax. And it's not written by Tom Flanagan. It is edited by Tom Flanagan and Chris Champion. And there's a number of authors that you can see who are, they're in this book, and there's 18 chapters with a whole bunch of different academics, judges, journalists. We're not talking about, and even if you wanted to deny that the earth was round or deny gravity, there's no law against denying the roundness of the earth or whether gravity exists. So that's got nothing to do with it. It's whether this is opening a group up to detestation and vilification. And you see, people like Ian Gentles, who's a historian from York University. And then you have Rodney Clifton, who actually was a supervisor in a residential school, married a woman who was in a residential school. He was a witness to everything that happened. We have Jonathan Kay, the famous, editor of National Post and Quillette. Jacques Rillard, historian from University of Montreal, etc., etc. So this is absurd that Gazan would be seeing this as, disseminating disinformation. And she needs to specify what she's talking about. What is actually incorrect in all of these chapters? She's never, ever made any comments about this. It's just views that she disagrees with. So that's the first example, is all of these chapters in grave error somehow residential school denialism, and it's not specified what facts that they are misinterpreting or mischaracterizing, and so on. So that's the first example. Second example is something that was reported on by Kimberly Murray, who's the special interlocutor for missing children and unmarked graves. And this is the claim that was made in Murray's report, that denialists had entered the Kamloops Indian residential school site without permission. And you don't need permission to enter into the residential school area. Like, you can just go and walk on. But some came in the middle of the night carrying shovels. They said they wanted to see for themselves if children are buried there. So that's the claim that is made by Kimberly Murray. Is this claim, this seems to be a very serious thing that would have happened. What is the evidence for this claim? And the former mayor of Kamloops, Mel Rothenberger, recently wrote or I guess he wrote a piece about this about a year or so ago, and saying this is a very strange kind of claim that came forward. And he goes over the kind of history of the claim and says, that there has been changes of the story. And just in terms of the area of that article where he talks about this, is that he says that Roseanne comes from Roseanne Casimir, who confirmed at least one person had come with a shovel. And this is a changing story, is kind of noticed. And that this came about at the National Gathering on Missing Children and Unmarked Burials in Vancouver in January 2023. And this claim made me go and look at the website at the videos of this gathering. And I couldn't find any presentation by Casimir about this. And the only interaction that I saw was when Kimberly Murray was thanking Casimir. And let's take a look at this video here, which I find is quite interesting. And this happened in January 2023.
I also want to acknowledge Kupi Casimir. I want to acknowledge you for the support you've given our office. And I think I want to say on behalf of all of Canada and the communities that I've spoken to, thank you. Thank you for bringing these atrocities to light at the scale that you did with your.
Are we kidding here? She wants to thank Casimir for bringing these atrocities to light. Is Murray talking about the remains of 215 children that were claimed to have been confirmed at the Kamloops Indian Residential School in this case? That's amazing if she's doing that, because this is a year and a half after Sarah Beaulier said that no remains have been confirmed and excavations would have to be done. So the fact that Murray is thanking Casimir for throwing the whole country into a hysteria is quite shocking.
Community. And I thank you for the continued support that your team provides to our office, and always know if there's anything. And I see your team over there. Hi, team over there.
The team? Her team? Casimir's team? Is this the lawyers and publicists and so on that were paid? It's the $12.1 million went to all these for excavations, supposed to be going for excavations, went to publicists and this. Is that what we're talking about when we say the team of Roseanne Casimir?
I tried to come over and say hello earlier. If there's anything we can do as you continue your work, we're here for you.
Wow. And so this interlocutor is supposed to be independent. You can see she's very closely aligned with all of the neo-tribal elites. And she, in fact, is a neo-tribal elite herself, because she was extensively involved in, this is Kimberly Murray, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So for years, she's been involved in this discussion of supposed missing children and burials. Anyway, so there's no mention, as I can see, but she had some discussions with Casimir at this gathering. And this led to this Kimberly Murray making this comment about people showing up with shovels. This, however, was found not to have been reported to police at the time, right? This is True North, Lindsay Shepherd and Lindsay Shepherd piece. She went to the police, asked if it had been reported, and there's no indication of this. So if this was regarded as a serious incident, which you expect it would be, quite threatening, people showing up in this way in the middle of the night, that was never reported to police. And, it's not as if the Kamloops Indian Band is adverse to doing this, because I found this out when I went to the Kamloops Indian Residential School in 2024. Let's look at what happened to me when I was just taking a photograph of a sign.
And what I came across there was the wire fence that was around the museum was now open. And so I was kind of wondering what was going on. So I walked in and I was accosted by a security guy who was saying, sacred site to me. And I said, oh, okay, what does this mean? And I wanted to talk to someone about the excavations. That's what I was telling this security guy. And he said, sacred site. And then he said, I can give you a brochure and then you can have a tour of the school. And I said, oh, okay, that'd be great. And then as I was talking to him, I said, but the museum, is it possible to talk to someone in the museum? And he said, oh yeah, that's okay. I said, so it was inside the sacred site fence, the museum, but I was able to go down to the museum. And as I was walking past the museum, I saw this fence it was open, and you could see beyond it was a white fence, might have been wood, might have been plastic, I'm not sure. And it was the area with the park benches and the gravel kind of path and the wheelchair access they're talking about in 2022 at the annual, kind of grieving process for the 1-year anniversary. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I went down there and I saw this sign on the fence, and the sign said, all the kind of rules for going into the fence. And so I thought, oh, I should take a picture of this sign because it said that women who are on their moon time, which means if you're menstruating, are not allowed to go in there. And also pregnant women are not able to go in there, and all sorts of other things like don't have plastics because it's bad for the environment and so on. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to take a picture of this sign. And as I was doing this, a security guard comes around the corner and starts berating me because I'm photographing and I'm going, no, I'm not photographing the sacred site, which is the unmarked graves, supposed unmarked graves. I'm photographing this sign. Anyway, so I'm gonna have to call don't make me call the RCMP here or whatever. So I'm like, oh, okay. Anyway, I didn't get a chance to go into the museum. So I went up there, and me and my two companions got into the car, and the security guard came over and took a photograph of our license plates.
So you can see that there's no opposition to calling the police in, and in fact, they have an RCMP detachment on the Kamloops Indian Bands Reserve. And just taking a photograph of a sign was seen as being so egregious that he was going to call the police if I didn't leave. And as well, he took a photograph of my license plate because he wanted to make sure I wouldn't be coming back on to do this. So that's another kind of indication, is that it's not like the Kamloops Indian Band is known for not calling the police. They threaten it at the drop of a hat. So why wouldn't they have done something about that with people showing up? The next thing that draws skepticism about this claim is that the story has changed numerous times, telling Murray about people with shovels. And then True North explains that she kind of corrected herself on CBC's Casimir and said that someone even showed up with a shovel in hand. So that's one person. So there was people and then one person. And then what we see in October 2025, which was last year, the story changed again. And this is Casimir speaking at the national gathering, final national gathering in
media. They wanted to know more. In our community, we also seen others that wanted to see more and know more. They were uninvited in a disrespectful manner, showing up with drones that were seen, and many wanted to take pictures of the site. And some even wanted to come up onto the shores of the riverbanks and come up and access the grounds, our sacred grounds. And some people said that they wanted to have, and they believed that they had a right to inform people and that they represented the people. And to me, that was so wrong because.
And that was Drea Humphrey, of course. You see that interview in May 2022. And what happened is that Drea Humphrey had been trying to arrange an interview with her for a year, and Casimir wouldn't get back to her. So she just bumped into her at the residential school and then took a recording of that. And this is just basic accountability, which Aboriginal Neo-Tribal elites are completely adverse to. And this is a huge problem because we cannot get answers about the situation at Kamloops.
For one, they weren't welcomed. They didn't come to us respectfully, and they came in assuming that they had some kind of a right, but they were on our lands. They were disrespecting the work. They were disrespecting the unmarked graves. They were disrespecting our survivors. They were disrespecting our people.
This is nonsense. And first of all, there's no unmarked graves. Secondly, no evidence of that. Secondly, $12.1 million of public funds for excavations. The band must answer for this. And this is just trying to stop accountability and transparency.
And yes, it was shared with me that security also had to stop people from showing up. There was a couple that showed up in the middle of the night with shovels.
A couple who showed up in the middle of the night with shovels. So there we have three different stories. A number of people, a single person, and a couple. And so this is, when you have inconsistent stories like that, it's an indication of their unreliability, and we can't trust the whatever the Camus Indian Band says, since they're prone to making all these false claims, saying they're going to do something when they're not doing it. And instead of being skeptical and looking for evidence, we have people like Sean Carlton, who just gobbles all this up, as was shown by the dismantling denialism program that was put on by the Aboriginal People's Television Network.
We need to remember that denial, are putting the kinds of pressure on that community, like showing up in the middle of the night with shovels, demanding access to dig for bodies.
And notice this, is when Carlton is making this statement about denialists showing up, Christopher Reid of the Aboriginal People's Television Network, in a very, very manipulative and biased way, some would say dishonest, has a picture of me holding a shovel, which is implying that I was one of the people who showed up with the shovels, which obviously is not true. I was just doing a video using this as a prop to say that excavations are important.
They're bolstered by the idea promoted by Widowson that ground-penetrating radar is not absolute proof of human remains.
So
we need to remember that
they're
denialists
pretending that that is somehow linked to Carlton's claim, but then switches to that I don't think that GPR is enough to say that human remains are in existence. And which of course is true. The only way you can determine this is through excavation. And this is the video that I actually did with the shovel, just to give you an understanding of the dishonesty of the and the manipulation that was engaged in by the Aboriginal People's Television Network. For the murders, this is a different matter, because we have the possibility of material evidence in the form of excavations, which brings me to my prop. The shovel. This isn't a spade. My friend Diane was saying you should use the, let's call a spade, but I've heard now that although I thought this was a spade, it's not a spade, it's a shovel. So I'm taking this with me to Kamloops as a prop. So there I say it clearly, it's going to be a prop that I'm going to use in terms of shooting that we're going to be doing at Kamloops, whereby I'm going to be saying excavations are needed. So I didn't end up using it as a prop, but I thought it might be handy. So that was my interest in it, is to draw attention to the necessity for excavations, not to use the shovel to show up and threaten people that I'm going to go start digging in the apple orchard. So that is the second example that Leah Gazan provides, which is about this claim that people or a person or a couple are showing up. We don't have any particulars of that. Casimir was saying that security had let her know this. Well, what are the particulars? So what date did this take place on? What was the number of people? Were the men and women? Was it men? Why wasn't it reported to police? All these kinds of questions, which of course, all these advocates are not interested in pursuing. And then we have the third example, which comes to me, which is about me, and that I was arrested, claims Gazan, in BC for spreading residential school denialism. And this is completely untrue. And doesn't Gazan have to be responsible for just making statements about citizens which are false? She seems to have no interest whatsoever in being accurate in what she's talking about. And I have a post about this on the wokeacademy.info site as well. And there's some documents. And basically what happened was that I was going to just ask, I had a sandwich board with two questions: what remains, and denial or truth, about Dallas Brody's actions of holding up a sign saying 0 bodies in front of a billboard that was misleading people with the 215 claim. And when I was going to just come and start, just see if people want to ask questions or have discussions, the university was claiming this was a public talk, which it was not. And they continue to argue that it's an event. It's not an event. Shouldn't need a permit to come on campus just to have some discussions with faculty, students, and staff and the public. And that if we're forced into doing that, that means anytime you go to campus to just meet with someone, then you're going to need to get a permit, which is ridiculous. And so that's the first thing that they said. And this was sent to me in an email. And I just ignored it because I wasn't there to give a public talk. And they said I was going to have to go through a booking process and that the Petch fountain was already booked, as if I'm trying to book this area for myself. I don't have to be there at all. I can just walk around the campus with a group of people, like, Socrates doing the Socratic method. And then when I arrived there on December 2nd, they had pre-prepared this notice where they said that I had to leave because my conduct was contrary to university policy expectations, where they said that I had to assume responsibility for my actions, ensure lawful personal conduct, and respect the rights, privileges, and safety of others. And they're claiming that I'm violating this when they had done this up before I'd even arrived. So they had no way of making any determination anyway about my conduct because I wasn't yet there. And anyone who watches how I conduct myself, I'm getting screamed at, assaulted, having drinks poured on me in other contexts, and I'm perfectly respectful. I never raise my voice, and I just try to ask people questions about their claims and see what evidence they have for them. Anyway, this is what was being argued with respect to that. And you can see here's me arriving on the campus with these 2 questions: what remains, or denial or truth. I don't need to have a table. I'm not distributing literature. I'm not, I don't need a sound system or anything. So, and my friend Kevin keeps on making, because I occasionally say event and I'm referring to this, but that's just, it's like me going to the washroom is an event. It's not the kind of quote unquote event that they're talking about, which is the kind that actually was organized by about 7 professors and faculty members on campus, where they actually had megaphones and they had like a microphone. They had an area that they were saying was theirs and so on. And that's just not what is going on here in terms of my participation in anything on campus. And you can see this as for my conduct. Simon Hergott, the genius videographer, who's just incredible, he's put together this kind of compilation of what happened. And you can see the difference between my behavior and how I comported myself and people who vandalized my property, assaulted people, screamed and yelled, and so on. It just is not even comparable. And the fact that my conduct has been questioned when no one even is concerned about all these other people is amazing.
Hey, Francis, I've just got word that the UVic security has contacted the police and that they have 3 officers stationed at UVic. Their intent is to enforce trespass notices against you and potentially others.
So this is Dallas Brody and me and Tim Thielman, the 1BC group, and which I'm not aligned. I should mention that I'm not aligned at all with 1BC. I'm a former NDP supporter, and I'm still have hopes of becoming one again if they ever get off their woke nonsense. But I appreciate the courage that all people associated with 1BC have shown, which includes Tara Armstrong, Dallas Brody, Tim Thielman, Paul Ratchford, etc. They're just trying to raise questions about the Kamloops claim, and I appreciate that. So that's why I am interacting with them.
For coming to campus today.
Well, we're going to be arrested. I'm going to be arrested. we will test the University of Victoria in terms of their clampdown on the ability to tell the truth about Kamloops. I will not be leaving the campus. University of Victoria has been spreading false information to the public and to citizens and to faculty members, and this is going to end. So that's just McLean, the person who wrote that previous thing, restriction from campus. And I'm trying to explain to her that it's not an event. She didn't listen to me at all. And I was met with 5 police officers. So that was just an amazing overkill in terms of pretending that I was some kind of threat on the campus. And you can see I'm never raising my voice. I'm very calm. And today, there's no evidence of the remains of 215 children at the Kamloops Senior Residential
UVic
School.
security. Is there anything I can do or say to have you leave on your own?
I will not leave on my own.
Okay. So right now you are arrested.
Okay, so you're going to arrest me and you're going to take me into the downtown?
Off the property.
Off the property?
And then we'll go from there.
Okay.
Back off as well, all of you over there.
And this is how other people behaved. Assaults, property damage, threatening the police, etc. That's Tanya Tagak, who's the throat singer, the famous throat singer, for people who are like that sort of thing. That's Tim Thielman, who had a smoke bomb thrown at him. And he's legally blind, unable to defend himself.
What are your words for the public watching?
This is what we've come to at academic institutions these days. You are not allowed to explore ideas on campus, and if you do, you will be arrested.
Planning to leave? I'm planning to leave.
Get out of here.
Behind the eyes of the man holding it.
And then they came up and they punched someone.
That's Logan Stats, who stole my sandwich board and destroyed it. And this is particularly interesting because police were trying to get my sandwich boards back, and they were threatened by this group of protesters.
What are you doing?
You need to stop coming forward.
You need to stop coming forward. That's what they told the police. And he just turned around and walked in the other direction.
If you don't have a society that requires evidence for claims, if you don't have people that are willing to stand up for truth, then what happens when the liars and the exploiters and the profiteers come for you?
You are an absolute embarrassment of an institution. You are not going to get away with this, and we are going to fight you to the end, and you will become an academic institution once more. This is what we've come to. We will not be intimidated. So you can see the difference in behavior there between how I acted, which was seen as being contrary to policy, and then all the, basically a deranged group of people, some of them students. And that was for me the most shocking in that being at UVic, because of course I was a student there between 1987 and 1992, was the complete, what almost seemed like zombification of the students who just could not have a discussion about a claim that is very, very important, and that in which UVic is misleading people about. So that gives you a sense of what took place and the double standard that exists at the University of Victoria. And Gazan, who's trying to criminalize asking questions, she is the one who is actually spreading misinformation. And in January 2025, she actually talked about the discovery of 215 children in unmarked graves at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. So this is years after we know that that is not the case, and this is what she's saying to the public.
Because in the recent years, since the discovery of the 215 children in unmarked graves in Kamloops, there has been a growing and disturbing rise in anti-Indigenous racism and residential school denialism. But what shocked me about the 215 is we knew before, in fact, because if you read the final report of the national, from the National Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, one of the things that they point to reconciling is all the children who never made it home in unmarked graves. We knew, but there it was right in front of our eyes. We could not hide from the truth, and sometimes truth is painful.
Truth is painful. That's true, but what she's saying is not true. And what information in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission supports the idea that, you know, there's clandestine burials at Kamloops? The Truth and Reconciliation did not name one missing child, you know, and generally what we're talking about is the cemeteries, burials in cemeteries where the markers have deteriorated, and I've done other posts on this subject. So Gazan, her agenda is not about truth telling. It is about preventing people from actually challenging the false claims that she and her allies are putting forward. And that claim was made in January 2025, about a year ago in Powell River. So it's not something that was done just after the announcement. It's just carried forward constantly for years. And because of this totalitarian agenda, right, what's happening is that Gazan, because she won't be able to stop us challenging this false information that she's putting forward. So to try to increase the pressure on people and make it more and more difficult for them to talk about the actual truth, she has reintroduced her bill to criminalize residential school denialism. And she did this in 2024 originally, but that proposed bill died on the order paper because of the election. So now she has just reintroduced this in 2025, just a few months ago. And so let's take a listen to what she's putting forward in this case.
Today I will be reintroducing my bill to recognize residential school denialism as a form of inciting hate. You know, it's been over a decade since the release of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Canada. And since that time, we have seen, since the discovery of unmarked graves, an increase.
Discovery of unmarked graves. She needs to support that with evidence. What she's talking about, is she talking about cemeteries where the graves were once marked and are now the markers have deteriorated, or is she talking about the Kamloops case? You know, is challenging the false claim about the remains being confirmed at Kamloops, is that going to be illegal? This is the question.
In denialism about what occurred in the residential schools. This is horrific, particularly because all members of Parliament unanimously supported my motion in 2022 to recognize what happened in residential schools as an act of genocide.
So that's the problem with that motion, is that although it's symbolic, it's being used to justify the criminalization of attempts to seek the truth about the residential schools. It's saying this is decided, when whether or not the residential schools are genocide is a matter of its intense controversy. And in the academic scene, we used to talk about this, 5 years ago, but now, of course, that's no longer acceptable in universities.
The first genocide that was recognized within Canadian borders. At a time where we are looking at, once again, building a nation on the backs of Indigenous peoples around our lands, territories, and resources in the name of national interest, in violation of constitutionally enshrined Indigenous rights. If this government is serious about reconciling with Indigenous people, it must ensure the protection of survivors.
So protection of survivors is preventing the challenging of their stories. And this is really a serious problem, because no one should just accept the stories of what's called survivors without evidence, because we have all sorts of false claims that are being made, the most significant being the story of Billy Coombs, who argued that Queen Elizabeth II had abducted 10 children, and the Queen wasn't even in Kamloops in that year. But also, like, how would the Queen be able to do that? That doesn't make any sense. The Queen is followed around all over the place by the media, and they would be watching her. And who were the names of these 10 children? Like, that's not even specified. So this obviously, there's untrue stories due to misremembering, not necessarily lying, but there could be lying as well to get the financial benefits that come from having all these stories that are being put forward.
It was the stories of survivors and our families that put us on a path towards reconciliation.
No, nonsense. Those stories have not brought about reconciliation. It's the opposite. They've caused the hysteria. When people try to correct the record, then this is, because people have been expected to believe this, it doesn't allow us to have any kind of meeting of minds about what happened.
So I'm calling on the government to do the right thing, to take on this bill, to support this bill, and truly honor the gift that residential school survivors provided to Canada.
That's what's called a forced gift in anthropology. So when you have someone gives a gift, but they expect something in return. So what's called survivors, which is former residential school students, share you their implausible accounts. And now, because they've done this, they expect you to provide them with all sorts of recognition and respect, not to mention the transfers, the millions of dollars which have been distributed because of these false claims. So, in terms of the future, we need to take what Leah Gazan is doing very seriously and challenge these false claims. And as I said, I'm not going to be intimidated. We'll see what the University of British Columbia is going to do. And the reason why University of British Columbia is so important is it is one of the most prestigious research institutions in Canada. But one of the things that they have been providing false information about is the Kamloops case. And we have a number of different entities at the University of British Columbia that are doing this. And as we see here, this is the provost, Dr. Gage Averill, and he is supposed to, as the provost, maintain excellence in the delivery of undergraduate, graduate, and professional education. This is not happening with respect to the residential schools and the unmarked graves because of the Department of Anthropology, which has Andrew Martindale as an archaeologist in that department. He has been saying that unmarked graves can be detected with ground penetrating radar. This has been absorbed by Jolie Viveros, who is the director of the First Nations House of Learning, in case you're wondering why I have that up there. And then we have the Residential Schools History and Dialogue Center, which is not a dialogue center, it's a monologue center, because Johnny Mack, who's the head of that, says that residential schools are not up for debate at the University of British Columbia, which is absolutely shocking. So I am not going in there. I'm not booking space. That's ridiculous. I'm going in there with my question about what remains have been discovered at the Kamloops Senior Residential School. And I just want to have some discussions with students, faculty, and the public. And that is what's going to be happening on January 22nd, 2026. So, in terms of January 22nd, this is very, very important. We are at a crossroads now at universities in British Columbia in particular, but also Canada. Do we want our universities to be academic institutions, or do we want them to be propaganda outlets of the Aboriginal industry and having the inability to have open inquiry and critical thinking about this claim at Kamloops? And the claim about the 215, it seems like a minor issue, just one claim. Why is it a big deal? But it actually is a huge deal, because if we can't have the truth about Kamloops, we can't get to the truth about anything. It's over in universities. And I know some people think that universities are ivory towers where just intellectual pursuits, and while that is true, universities also have tremendous impact on society in terms of the development of knowledge, the dissemination of knowledge, the training of professionals, and being a bulwark against authoritarianism. And if you look at countries like Nazi Germany, which had did have the most advanced university system in the world in the 1920s, what the Nazis did is they went in there and they replaced the academics with party loyalists. And this meant that those universities were no longer academic institutions. And so we're not there yet, but we're heading in this direction. And therefore, I'm calling on all people who are interested in our universities and the pursuit of truth to join with me and to come to the University of British Columbia to show that this is an academic space. This is an intellectual space. We must be able to have these conversations in universities, because if we can't have them in universities, we're not going to be able to have these conversations anywhere in Canadian society. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you on January 22nd. Have a great day.